Tamryn. Hi, Tamryn. Over to you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Business Builder. I think this is possibly the worst lighting I've had. I'm so sorry. I have a bit of flu. I haven't prepped properly, but I promise the content is prepped. I hope everyone is warm and feeling healthier than I am today, and looking forward to today. Normally, this is when I introduce the speaker, but the speaker is me. So I'm going to go straight into the content and I'll do a bit of an introduction for myself there. So today we are looking at making sure we get paid. A very, very important topic, a topic that I think that most of us are interested in, regardless of where our business is. So before looking at how we get paid, I'm going to chat about a little bit about me and why I am actually qualified to teach you about getting paid. So my name is Tamryn, and I am the founder and CEO of the Farside Group. The group currently consists of Farside Accounting in South Africa, Farside Solutions in the UK. We have our Farside Business Builder, which is hosting this event, and we have Farside Foundations, which is our non-profit arm. The whole group is focused on preventing burnout in business owners. Our purpose is to help service professionals create a business instead of self-employment. And because I'm an accountant by trade, we use a lot of numbers to help you do this, but numbers is not the only thing that we do. It started with numbers, however. It started with Farside Accounting back in 2007 when I was young and dumb enough to think that being a good accountant meant I would be able to run an accounting business. I found out very quickly that being a business owner is its own skill set, and being good at accounting was not enough. I went through 3 rounds of burnout before virtually collapsing and finally accepting the fact that I needed to learn how to be a business owner. I rebuilt the company. It is now 18 years old, and we do a lot of things on top of accounting. And my favorite part of what I do is to teach people how to avoid my mistakes. Today, you're going to learn about one of my biggest mistakes, mistakes that really hurt, and mistakes that heavily contribute to burnout. Those are mistakes that affect how much money you have in the bank. So today we're looking at collections and making sure you get paid. Now, you might have heard this saying before. Sales are vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king. Sorry, I seem to have, there we go. It is there. Cash is king. Hopefully it doesn't skip forward 3 times because I clicked 3 times to get there. So I have an entire YouTube series where I explain why profit is more important than sales. I'm going to put that link in the chat for you now because it's actually a very important distinction and something you do need to know as a business owner. Because, okay, I'm back. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we hear
Okay.
you now.
If you are battling to see, I did put a note in the chat in the beginning, but just a reminder, put your cursor over my screen, right click, and from the menu choose pin, and you will see that the screen will fill your entire view so you can see everything in detail. So sorry, so I was saying, I have a YouTube series, the link is in the chat, that will explain why profit is more important to you as a business owner than sales. Business owners tend to track their sales only and think it's the only number worth tracking, but it is definitely not. Your profit is your most important number. However, sales and profit are... Sorry, everyone, having a really bad day today with the internet.
I'm sorry to hear that,
Can
Tamryn.
everybody hear me again?
I do. We do.
Are we all good? I have switched to a different Wi-Fi, so hopefully I will last this time. All right. So as I was saying, sales and profit are just accounting numbers on your accounting reports. No matter how important they are to your business, at the end of the day, if your customers do not physically pay you, those numbers actually mean nothing. You need to have cash in the bank in order for your business to survive. So, cash management is one of your most important jobs as a business owner. In fact, of the businesses that fail, 82% are because of bad cash management. So it is something you really should take seriously. And there is more to cash management than collections. I do have another YouTube series I'm putting in the chat for you. You can grab it and watch it later on some tips for cash management. And we've actually also done a business builder webinar on cash management before. You can also find that on YouTube. So do yourself a favor and watch those, because collections are not the only thing you need to worry about. But getting paid is your first and most important step in managing your cash. So that is why we're going to be focusing on that today. Now, despite how important it is, 54% of business owners battle to get paid on time. And 40% of business owners don't chase those payments, those late payments, because they're scared they're going to damage the relationship with their clients. But really, it's more important to chase than you realize. 20% of invoices are paid 2 weeks late. 33% are paid after 30 days. 20% are paid after 60 days. And 11% of invoices go unpaid. They are never paid. You cannot survive as a business if it takes this long to get your cash in. If you are facing payment days like this, you need to fix it. And I fully understand not wanting to chase clients for payment. It's awkward and it can be unpleasant, and none of us want to do it, but we need to. And the good news is that it doesn't have to be awkward and unpleasant, not if we set things up correctly. There are two main reasons why people do not pay us on time. The first is that we didn't establish requirements up front. So this works two ways. From our side, we didn't take the time to actually tell our clients what our terms are. Okay, so we need to actually tell our clients what we expect in terms of invoicing and payment. But also, if you are dealing with big businesses and corporates, you need to find out the specific requirements from their side, because many corporates need you to supply invoices in specific formats and to be submitted according to strict timelines. And if you don't meet those requirements, they don't pay. So establishing requirements up front is one of the major reasons people don't get paid. And the second one is simply forgetfulness. Again, this works two ways. Sometimes you forget to send the invoice, and often they forget to pay it because you aren't reminding them, because you feel bad to chase. Very, very few people actually avoid paying a bill, and most people will be very embarrassed when they realize that they haven't paid your invoice. So most of your late payments are a result of one of these two things, and that is great news because it means we can fix them. So we're going to look in this webinar, we're going to look at three different things, well, three different sections on how to prevent these two causes. We're looking at things you do when you quote, things you can do when you invoice, and then things you do after invoicing. But before we get into them, I am going to do a quick sidestep. I do not have time to get into these things in this webinar. But you are going to find it much easier to set up your pricing and invoicing systems if you have these three things crystal clear: your purpose and goals, your ideal client, and the exact services or products you want to offer, how you price them, and how you deliver them. You need to have these specifics in your mind before you create an invoice system, because your purpose and goals will determine the type of client you want to work with. Your ideal client determines the services you offer and the outcomes that you want for that particular type of client. And those outcomes will then determine the way you deliver your service, which in turn affects the way you price, the way you quote, how and when you invoice, and how and when you collect payment. So if you haven't spent time on these 3 things, I highly recommend that you do. If you need help doing so, please give me a shout. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you have established these, and we're going to look at what you have to do before creating an invoice with specific reference to making sure you get paid. So what do you need in place at the quoting stage? The most important thing that you can do to make sure you get paid happens way before you issue an invoice. In fact, it should happen way before you create your first quote. Please do yourself a favor and get official terms and conditions drawn up for your business by a lawyer. This is one of the biggest and most expensive mistakes I made in my business. I ran for about 3 or 4 years without any contracts at all, which I can tell you was disastrous. I had no leg to stand on when it came to arguing with a client about service delivery or payments or anything, because there was nothing written down. When I finally came to my senses and created a contract, I created it myself, and it wasn't good enough. So I still ended up having a client who tried to sue me for work that was not my problem, and it was extremely stressful. And I eventually had to just give in and hire a lawyer and pay them anyway to have the problem resolved for me, because I was actually in the right, but it ended up having a lawyer or needing a lawyer to prove that I was in the right. It would have been far less stressful and much, much cheaper to have just gotten a lawyer to create ironclad terms and conditions for me right from the beginning. So please, I know this is a cost, and there is a good chance that if you are attending a webinar on getting paid, that you are struggling with your cash flow. So having to incur another cost is not something you really want to consider right now. But I promise you, this is not a cost, it is an investment. This is something that will protect your future. It is very, very worthwhile. At the very least, and do not tell a lawyer I told you to do this, at the very least, get a template off the internet and rewrite it. But I promise you that even that is not good enough. You really should have them drawn up specifically for you. Your terms and conditions need to cover the following: what you need to do the job. So what do you need from the client? What documentation do you need from them? Do you need copies of their IDs or proof of their home address, or do you need them to send you an organogram? Or maybe you don't need anything at all, but have this clear ahead of time. If you need information, if you need phone numbers or contact details, you need accounting records, whatever it is you need, work that out and put it into the contract so that your client knows that you're going to be asking for that specific information, and so that they're aware that you can't deliver the service without it. Then you need to be clear on how you are charging, how and when. So how much, of course, must be in your contract, but also, do you want to charge them in phases? So do you want to charge a deposit and then a progress fee and a finalization fee, or do you charge in full upfront, or do you charge at the end? You need to know this before you begin, and it needs to be very clear in the T's and C's. So when do you invoice and when you expect payment? And must they pay you on the day they receive the invoice, or within 7 days or 30 days, or whatever it is you have decided, you need to know it yourself and it needs to be clear in your contract before they say yes. You need to know how and when you deliver your service or your product. What can they expect? Can you give them specific timelines? Do you need to warn them that the timelines can vary? You need to define what a finished and delivered product is and what could be considered legitimate reasons why you can't deliver according to your promises. Define those things and have them in the contract. And lastly, make it very clear what is your responsibility and what is the client's responsibility. Because in order for you to meet your responsibility, you probably need them to do certain things. And you don't want to give them any reason to be able to question your work or refuse a payment on a technicality. Make sure the technicalities are covered in your T's and C's. And this is one of the reasons why I recommend getting a lawyer in instead of using a template, because a good commercial lawyer knows what to ask you in order to draw up a contract that protects both you and the client. If you don't have one or you don't know a good commercial lawyer, I am going to pop a LinkedIn profile in the chat for you right now. Robin is one of the best lawyers I know, but she's also one of the best people I know. She will take good care of you. Her fees are beyond reasonable, and she's a wonderful person to work with. So if you need help with T's and C's, please give her a shout. At least have a consultation with her about it and find out what the fee is before you just decide you're not going to do it. Okay, but now that you have terms and conditions, and let me tell you, just having terms and conditions is already going to improve your collections dramatically if you don't have one already. So that's already going to be a massive difference in your collections process. But once you have them, we're going to look at what you do at the time of invoicing. So you need to have an actual invoicing system. I don't mean software. I mean you need to have your steps for invoicing clear in your mind. Things that you do every single time you issue an invoice that will ensure that everything is correct. So step 1 is send out your terms and conditions. Please take the time to make sure that your client doesn't just read the terms and conditions, that they understand your terms and conditions before you issue an invoice, before they accept a quote. Make sure they understand what you are supplying, how you are supplying it, how you invoice, and when they are supposed to pay you. Have it in writing and make sure that they sign their acceptance of it. Then you're going to ask about specific requirements. This was reason number 1 for most unpaid bills. 61% of bad collections are simply because the invoice doesn't meet specific requirements. So you can fix 61% of your unpaid bills by fixing this problem. So either it's because you don't have a legal invoice. Every jurisdiction in the world has a specific set of requirements of what constitutes a legal invoice. So make sure you know the ones for your jurisdiction and that your invoices meet those requirements. And then create a checklist for yourself to get answers from your client for their requirements. So what do you need to send? In other words, do they need supporting documents? Do they want to see purchase orders? Do they want to see slips that support the invoice? Who do you send it to? When do you send it? What do you do when they respond? Where do you store these documents so that if they ask for them again, you know where to find them? and when do you invoice again? Create this checklist of answers for you, steps that are applicable to your business and your service, and things that you know you have marked off every single time you've signed on a new client so that your invoices meet their requirements. For big corporates, remember I said they might have very specific payment steps and requirements. So you need to comply with those requirements in order to get paid on time. That might not seem fair, but whether it is fair is besides the point because it's how it works. So if you're working with a corporate client, make sure to ask them what they need on their invoices. Do they need specific references? Do they want very specific supporting documents like timesheets or slips or photos? Do they need the invoice to be submitted via a specific portal or sent to a specific email address? Do they want a specific department or person listed on the invoice? Do they need specific contact details? Specifically, VAT details are very important. Do they want those showing on the invoice? And do they need to receive that invoice a number of days before payment? And of course, this is your most important one because this is all about getting paid. Most corporates have a specific day that they do payment runs. So you want to know what that day is and how many days before it that your invoice and reminder must reach them so that your invoice is in that payment run. Simply meeting your client's requirements will dramatically improve your collections. And the last thing to bear in mind when you're doing an invoice is if you are charging in phases or if your client does have specific timelines, then add those to your calendar. Set reminders that pop up and tell you that I need to send invoice number 2. I need to send the timesheet so that they accept invoice number 1. I need to send a reminder to the payment department today so that they pay me in 5 days' time. Set those reminders now. While you know why those answers are fresh in your head and you've already established the time, set the reminders in your calendar now so that you do them on the day you need to. Ideally, please do your invoicing in cloud accounting software, something like QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks is obviously not the only option. It's just the one we tend to recommend because it's extremely user-friendly for non-accountants. So do yourself a favor, get yourself QuickBooks Online. Not only does it ensure that your invoices are in a correct legal format for your jurisdiction, they also charge in your local currency, which makes it a lot easier to pay and to budget. But they also give you the ability to do things like setting up automatically recurring invoices. So, or you can create invoices ahead of time and set them to automatically go out on specific dates. So you, in other words, you don't have to set yourself reminders. You can just line up the invoices and you know that they're going. Okay, if you can't do something like QuickBooks, please don't forget to add them to your calendar. Just make sure that those things get done. So far, to prevent late payments, we have defined specific terms and conditions, and you have communicated those to your clients, and you have asked the clients for their requirements and set things up so that you meet them. That means that we have now taken care of the biggest reason for late payments. It's not clarifying expectations up front. You and your client are now 100% on the same page regarding how much they're going to pay you and when they're going to pay it. And there is no room for argument or misunderstanding. I promise you doing these things, these simple things, terms and conditions, communicating them to your clients, and then setting your reminders so that you do things when your client needs you to. If you get those things in place, you will already have dramatically improved your collections. But we've still got one reason that we need to take care of, and that's the fact that people forget. So if you're using something like QuickBooks where you can set your invoices up ahead of time, or you have added your dates into your calendar and your reminders pop up, you are not going to forget to send your invoice. So that's not going to be a problem. Now you have to set up a payment collection system so that your client doesn't forget to pay you. After a pricing system, your collection system is your most important financial system. It does not matter how much you invoice in a month if you don't get paid. You need that money in the bank. So my first piece of advice is if you offer a recurring service or you have set retainers, then try and collect payment by debit order. Write it into your contracts. Don't even make it negotiable. It's the absolute best way of ensuring that you will get paid. However, not all of us have the luxury of recurring retainers, and a debit order is not always feasible. In that case, if you can, make them pay up front. I know a lot of people battle with this concept, but hear me out for a second. If someone has sat down with you and decided you are the service provider for them, they have accepted your quote, they are happy with your price, and they want you to provide this service for them, then there is no reason why they should refuse to pay that price up front. If they do, it is an indication that they're not actually fully trusting you to deliver. And that should make you question if you actually want to be working with them. Because they can, at the very, very least, pay a deposit. So if you can collect by debit order, if debit order is not an option, then try and get paid upfront. But again, not everyone has set retainers, not everyone has set packages. If you're using something like time-based billing, then taking your full fee upfront is challenging. In that case, you need to have a system in place that dictates when you invoice, when you remind a client, how often you remind a client, and at what point you stop being friendly. The first thing you need to create a collection system is payment terms. In other words, how many days are you giving a client to pay you? So are you giving them none? In other words, they pay you when the invoice is sent out? Or do you give them 5 days or 7 or 30? You need to know the due date of your invoice. And just a note, you should have already have decided upon that in your terms and conditions. It should be very clear, and your client should already know this before you get to a collection system. But it is a very important starting point in the collection system because you need to know at what point you start reminding. Okay, so once you have your payment terms very clearly in your mind, you are going to set up a system that sends reminders. The first reminder you want to send is on or before the due date. So it could be 2 days before, a nice friendly email that goes, hey, we just wanted to remind you, invoice XYZ is coming up for payment in 2 days. Or, hi, we wanted to remind you, invoice XYZ is due today. So a very, very friendly reminder on or before the due date, or both, 2 days before and on the due date. Then, if they do not pay on the due date, you want to send one 3 to 5 days after the due date. Another friendly invoice, because we're still assuming that your client has just forgotten. So, hi, invoice XYZ was due 3 days ago. It's now overdue. Please make payment at your earliest convenience. Now, you can repeat this for a while, the friendly reminder, for as long as you are comfortable with. But at some point, you do have to accept that maybe the reminder is not working. Okay, So I would say maybe repeat your friendly reminder for double the terms date. So if, for example, you give 7 days to pay, give them up to 14 days afterwards before you switch to the slightly firmer reminder. Because now you know that it's not been forgotten. Now, before we head for the firmer one, just a side note, make it easy for your clients to pay you. Make sure your bank details are on the invoice and on the reminders, and preferably offer them more than one way to pay. If you can, have a payment gateway so they can do EFT or instant EFT or credit card. And if you can, have a pay now button on the invoices and on the reminders. Because the easier it is to pay immediately, the more likely it is that your client will pay the second they see that reminder, especially if they have just forgotten and they're not dodging you. Then they're going to pay out of embarrassment as fast as they can. So if you make it easy to pay immediately, they generally will pay immediately. However, if you have sent your friendly reminder a few times and they still haven't paid, then at this point, you need to click from very friendly to a little bit firmer, a warning that this invoice is now properly overdue, and if payment is not made within a certain number of days, you are going to add interest. So as I said, the actual timing of this, it depends on your terms, but I recommend you do it within a repeated term period. So if you've given people 7 days to pay, you're going to be sending an interest warning on 14 days overdue. If you are offering an ongoing service and you're doing project billing, then please, this is also the point that you stop supplying work. And you warn them that you stop the work and it will not resume until they have paid in full. You can still make this reminder friendly, but it's got to be on the firmer side. If you want to, you can offer them an alternative to the interest as well. So if you are kind, you can offer them the option of a payment plan if you realize that they are battling to make payment. Okay. Now, if you have warned them that interest is going to be added in 2 days, then please, in 2 days' time, add the interest. Stick to your warning, because if you don't, you will not be taken seriously. So add the interest. The next step is voluntary, but I do recommend that after an invoice has gone way overdue, you actually send them a warning that they will be handed over for collection if they do not pay. And after 3 payment terms, I recommend that you do actually hand them over. I know this is unpleasant, but I can tell you from running a system like this for quite some time already that most people will pay after the first reminder. A few will pay after the third reminder. And it is extremely rare that someone doesn't respond to the interest warning. If they don't, if someone doesn't respond at the point that you've told them you're going to charge interest, then there's a good chance they are actually dodging you and you are going to need to hand them over. It is worth having an arrangement with the collection agency and using them, because it's better to get partial payment through an agency than no payment at all. And if a client has gone through this entire process of friendly warning or friendly reminder, friendly warning, more serious warning, and then a warning about a collection, then handing them over is not going to ruin the relationship, because they're not interested in keeping a good relationship with you if they have gotten to that point. Okay. This is a very uncomfortable part of business ownership. And collections are often ignored by business owners because they are unpleasant, and they don't want to ruin the relationship. But like I just said, if you've gotten to the point where you've sent multiple reminders and they still haven't paid you, the client doesn't care about the relationship. And I know collections are even harder at the moment because the whole world is taking strain and nearly everyone has cash flow issues right now. And if you're even slightly soft-hearted, who are going to feel bad for your clients when they say that they can't pay you. I very soft-hearted when it comes to this. I feel terribly sorry for people, especially as an accountant, if I can see that they're battling with their cash flow and I know they're not lying and I feel sorry for them. So I just want you to remember something at this point in time. Your client came to you for a service which you provide at a rate that they agreed to. You are not doing them a favor by letting them use your business. You are a service provider. They needed the service, they chose you, they agreed to your price, and they agreed to your terms. You are not a bank, and it is not your job to finance another business. If they agreed to your price and they used your service, then they must pay the price they agreed. I know it's tough, but you cannot put yourself out of business because you want to help someone else. That is not fair on you, the client, or all your other clients who are reliant on you. So put your system in place. Have your email templates ready, written for you to use ahead of time. If you already have the system, you know your timing, you have your wording, you don't have to think about it. You don't let emotion come into it. You just set the reminders in your calendar, you copy, you paste, you send. It makes it much easier. Of course, what makes it even easier is if you don't do the collections yourself. You can have them done via a third party. So now, one of the most common ones is to have a collections expert, such as your accountant, do the collections for you. And that obviously comes at a cost, but it's normally a cost that pays for itself, so it is worth considering. But if you have a team, you can also allocate a team member who has the iron constitution to be a collector. So that way, you can keep the friendly relationship with your client and they can do the collections. Or you can do it the other way around. If your team is providing the service, they can keep the friendly relationship with the client and you can play the unpleasant collector. If it is just you, or perhaps your whole team is soft-hearted, then another option that I have seen used very, very well by other businesses is to actually have a completely fictitious team member who does collections. Set up an email address for Beryl or Mavis and send all of your collections communications from Mavis. You maintain friendly communications with your client. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have to stop work on the project. Mavis won't let us finish until you've paid. Please, can you discuss payment with her? So having a Mavis or a Beryl is one of the easier ways of handling collections, especially if you've already got your set reminders created right from the start. And another option that makes it so much easier is to use software. There are a few software options out there. This is not the only one, but we do highly recommend Nagging Panda. It's wonderful software. It automates the entire process for you, and it uses these friendly, fuzzy, lovable pandas that make the whole thing far less awkward. So I use Nagging Panda for my own collections, and I absolutely love the system. However you do it, whether it is you directly, whether it's a collections agent, software, a team member, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you have actually set yourself a system of reminders and warnings at specific time periods with specific wordings, because they will improve your collections by up to 42%. And that has an extremely positive effect on your cash flow. So do take it seriously. Do set up the system. How can we help you at Farside? There's a couple of things that we can do with collections and cash flow. We have packages that help you with your pricing and your profitability. So if you feel like you're not making enough money for the effort you're expending, you can give us a shout. You can outsource your entire invoicing function for you. So we do all of the requirements and T's and C's and all of that and make sure that everything is correct. And you can outsource your collections to us as well. Or you can get Nagging Panda through us. We provide the software and we help you set it up and integrate it. And then we also have packages to help you fix your bank balance. So we look at more than just the collections and we make sure that you have enough cash in your account that you stop lying awake at night worrying about how you are going to make payments the next day. So if any of that sounds good to you, please take down my email address, pop me an email, and we can chat about your options. Otherwise, we are at the end, and I'm hoping that there are lots of questions for me. So please put on your mics and your cameras or pop your questions in the chat and let me know what you would like to know about the steps that I shared today.
Well, Tamryn, not a question, but maybe rather just an accolade for what you've presented today. Wow, I've been in business for 25 years and I think I've learned quite a lot from you today. And I hope we can put it in practice and see how we can work closer with you.
Thanks,
Thank
Neil.
you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, well, as I say, I'm trying to help people not make my mistakes, and these are all mistakes that I made, and have learned from. And I know that if you implement these things, it makes a massive difference in your business. So
Excellent. So much. Appreciate that.
awesome. Are there any questions from anyone else? Uh,
Perhaps if there's not a question coming in, then I can just say yes, definitely the awkwardness of telling a person that if you don't do work, if you don't pay, there's no more work, especially in the project side, which happens from our side. You almost feel like you've been baited and you got to work more to try get the last bit out. And yeah, we probably write off 30,000 Rand a year in bad debt. And if I can recover that, it's actually worth our while.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the thing is when we look at things like the cost of a terms and conditions or a collector or this even setting up this fictitious Mavis,
Mm,
so having another email address and the time that it takes to send these things. We look at those things and we think, oh, I don't have the time or I don't have the money. But if you
mm,
look at what you're losing because you're not following those steps, you
absolutely.
you you need to do it. You need to have those things in place. You're going to make so much more money just simply by collecting what you've already invoiced instead of
Mm,
having to now work harder, get in another project, do more for a client, to convince them that they should pay you money they already owe you.
yeah. We're trying a little bit of the Jack Welch GE way where you get rid of the 10% of the bottom feeders and work on the top 10. And that has saved because it tends to be the people at the bottom who don't pay also the ones who give you most of your problems.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
That is something I meant to touch on and didn't. It's in the ideal client profile. People think that the ideal client profile is for marketing. And yes,
mm,
you do need an ideal client profile for your marketing. You do. It does help with the marketing tremendously. But actually, what I encourage people to have an ideal client profile for is for mental health. You need to know what type of person you want to be working with. My experience, I said yes to too many of the wrong type of people over the years, and it's contributed quite heavily to my burnout and my anxiety. And it is always the client who's giving you the most grief is the one who's not going to pay at the end of the day. So that's the one that's questioned how much work you've done. They've questioned your delivery, and they've argued and they haven't given you the information that you needed to start in the first place. All of those ones that make life difficult, they're the ones who ask for a discount in the first place and then they don't pay on time. So knowing your ideal client, knowing who that person is and what they look like makes a big difference to getting paid at the end of the day. Hester, what do you do if someone wants to speak to your fake person? That's a good question. So, later, just tell them they will call you back. But they don't, so that's a problem. So either you can call in someone like Layla and get a virtual assistant to suddenly be Mavis for you. Or what I did for years actually was I just kept everything on email and I didn't give an option of phone numbers. So there were no phone numbers. And if people do ask, you can always, especially in today's age, Mavis works from home. She has bad cell phone signal. Please can you pop it in WhatsApp or an email, and she'll chat to you that way. That can help sometimes. Also, sometimes it can also, if the question is about the work itself, Mavis doesn't know the answers. Mavis doesn't do the work, Mavis does collections. So Mavis can respond with, if you have a question about the work delivery, please call Hester. And Hester can say, please drop any collections questions in an email to Mavis. That also helps.
I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm on this webinar, because it's easy to work with a small business. But if you are the small business and you work 100% for the corporate, and it so happens I went actually off camera to send the email to my husband and said, where are those proposals that I've asked you for the other day? So he sent, and I see that he actually does say 30 days from invoice. So my question is, there are not many corporates. What do you threaten them with if that is your client? And no, it's not the type of job where you can now say, I'd rather go to the small business.
Yeah. When you're dealing with a corporate as a small business, you're in a difficult position. It still helps to have terms and conditions, because if they've signed them, they have agreed to your terms. But you don't really want to end up in a legal battle, because they've got more power for a legal battle than you do. So if you're working with a corporate, my recommendation is to really spend a lot of time finding out what their requirements are for invoicing and making sure that you are happy with them before you say, yes, I'll help you. It might be better to pass on a corporate than to accept. We get very excited about dealing with big business because we think that it's going to make us a lot of money. But sometimes as a small business dealing with big business, you can actually put yourself out of business because they are only going to pay 30 days from invoice, or sometimes worse, sometimes it's 60 days from invoice, or you don't meet specific requirements and they use small print to get out of payment entirely. And unfortunately, I don't want to knock the corporates. There's a lot of good big corporates out there who are good about working with small business, but there's a lot who will take advantage knowing that you can't take them to court. So you need to do your due diligence before you start delivering work to a big company, and make sure that the type of person you want to work with, that your contact there is reliable, and that you are happy with the payment terms, because they are probably going to lay out the payment terms. Very few big corporates will stick to your payment terms. They pay according to their own. Again, not fair, but it's the way it is if you want to work with a big corporate. So make sure that you can sustain the time period that they've given you. If they're going to pay within 45 days after invoice, make sure that you can survive for 45 days after invoicing without receiving that payment. And then make sure that you've met all of their requirements in terms of when their payment run is, how long before the payment run they must receive that invoice, even if it means that you actually pre-send the invoice. I'm sure you've noticed some of the if you use a virtual office provider at all, we use one in Farside. We are invoiced on the 1st of the month. So we would have been invoiced on the 1st of June for the month of June by the virtual provider. They actually send us that invoice on the 25th of May. They send it 5 days before. It's dated the 1st of June. We only have to pay it on the 1st of June, but they send it to us on the 25th of May. And they do that to make sure we pay them on the 1st of June. So if you're working with a corporate and you know that there's going to be trouble with payment runs, that's also something you can do, is predate and send an invoice ahead of time. Because sometimes that will help you.
I hear what you're saying. Unfortunately, being a consulting engineer, you don't have a choice. It's not like the smaller store down the road needs your services because you're in a field that you're specializing in. Yes, I've already managed to get him to drop some of the clients. But, you know, sometimes I saw this warning from one of the corporate retailers. Invoice rejected. Well, we actually do statements. Their system asks for a specific format in Excel. Something to do with a comma. And it's rejected. But we're getting used to it. And I said to somebody the other day, ad hoc is very ad hoc if you are a consulting engineer.
Very, yes. I know what you're talking about as well. Yeah, so that's why I said sometimes they ask you to use specific portals or specific formats. So some of them want you, I'm assuming this is one of those, where you've got to do a statement in Excel in a very specific format, and then it has to be uploaded by a very specific portal. And the reason that you need to find those requirements out beforehand is because of horrendous things like this. I mean, if you want to be paid tomorrow and today you find out that you used a comma where you should have used a full stop, and now it's going to be another 2 weeks because you've got to recreate the invoice, you've got to resubmit it, it's got to go through the whole approval process again, and then only it will go into their next payment run. And so your entire payment is delayed by, it can be up to 3 to 4 weeks, just because of a comma. It's very frustrating. It's so frustrating. So it helps to be very, what's the word? Annoying, actually, right at the beginning. Sit down with that contact that you have at the corporate and say, okay, we've established the service you want, and you've seen my terms and you know how I'm going to be delivering it. That's great. But now I need to know every single step in your payment process so that I can meet those requirements and be paid on time. And if they don't know, rather ask them for someone in their accounts department that you can speak to and say, look, I want to be paid on time. It's very important to me. A small business, I can't survive for 60 days without payment. So please tell me exactly what I need to do so that you don't reject an invoice, because it really will be detrimental for my business. If they're a nice corporate, they will help you. If they're a nice corporate. Hey. Is that all of them? I see a couple of people had to drop off for another call. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Is everybody fine? Awesome. As I said, if you need help with collections or accounting or cash flow in general, please do give us a shout. We would love to help you. But otherwise, I hope that what we've gone through today will help you to improve your collections going forward. And I'd love to hear from you if they do. So please do give me a shout in the future if you find that any of these steps have improved your collections. I'd love to know. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.